What up? I'm Josh Paulson, and welcome to Your Story Now. Today we are going to look at getting a story from a story statement. So make a stage play for middle schoolers to help them get better at acting. Now I want to remind you guys of something. Stage play is a form of storytelling. We're focusing on creating the story, kind of the core. So the stage play part is sort of relevant, but it's not too relevant. We're not going to worry about that right now. We will get into discussing story forms theories and choosing a medium in later videos, but we're not going to get into that yet. So this could just be make a story. I'll just write make a story for middle schoolers to help them get better at acting. So we know a few things right here. We can look at what are middle schoolers interested in. And of course, this will depend on the time, this will depend on the place, like is this for a school, is this some people that you know personally? So this is going to vary a lot. Some middle schoolers might love a certain topic, others might hate the same topic. So of course, this gets into knowing your target market and what they're interested in. And then what are some skills they need to improve on? Let's say that they really need to work on character arcs because they've just been playing flat characters for most of the skits or whatever they've been a part of, and so they need to have a character who changes. This tells us immediately, and in a lot of stories, characters do have dynamic changes, but not all of them, that we need to have a story with dynamic character change, which is really helpful for us to know. If we're looking at other acting skills, we might say, okay, well, we need to have variation. So we need to have characters able to move from emotional extremes. And I'm not saying that you should pick everything that people could work on for this stage play, but I do recommend that you, for this goal, look at what are some of the ways. Essentially, we're just looking at how can I help accomplish this goal? How can I meet this story statement? And so if we're looking at emotional extremes, if we're looking at variation, then we can consider what is a story that would encourage that. We might not have a lot of time. If we're making a short stage play, maybe it's more of a skit, like 5-10 minutes, then we need to make sure that our overall statement captures this emotional extreme. So let's look at emotional extremes as our goal. So we could have, and this is going to seem very simple, but we could look at something like characters get into a heated argument, or great friends get into a heated argument. That could be our overall story, because we have the happiness, the joy, because when we look at heated argument, they get into a heated argument, the implication, what we can draw from this is that they were in the opposite at the beginning. So it could be that friends are having a blast hanging out. And so what we're doing here is that we are creating a story that allows the emotional extremes by saying, okay, we need to have one extreme and we need to have them start with the other. And we could always flip this around if we would rather to sworn enemies become friends. And of course, hopefully you can pull this off in writing, and that's where rule of power and stuff comes in. But the goal here is to give the middle schoolers opportunities to improve on their acting. So right here we've got great friends get into a heated argument, sworn enemies become friends. Let's say that instead of emotional extremes, we were looking at stories with dynamic character change, not characters feeling different things. In this case, the characters aren't really changing, it's they got new information and so they're responding to that new information. So let's look at characters actually changing. So if we have a story where a character, for example, is perhaps they are a liar and they become truth teller, maybe to a fault. Or perhaps we have a story where the characters are fill in the blank. Basically, if we want to show a character change, we can go with one trait, and then we can look at them shifting to, it may not even be an opposite trait, but an adjacent trait. So for example, it could be that a character, rather than loving dogs, goes to loving cats, which I know we kind of talk about it as if they're opposites, but depends on your perspective. I'd say you could call those adjacent traits. We could have our character go from, and that's maybe not as strong of a thing as we want. We could have it, a character goes from trusting their friend to distrusting their friend. It could be that we have a character go from excitement and joy, and maybe, no, we're not going to go with the opposite here. we're going to go with pensive and nervous, which is redundancy. We could have a character go the opposite way. So rather than it being pensive and nervous, we could flip these around and we could say, well, we want them to go from that to that. I would say with school skits, you're probably going to have a lot better luck with moving to the good rather than to the bad. Depends on the school. So what we've got here are some ways to look at our vision and to consider how do we move from A to B. And since we know a story is something that happens, our story can be like main character or all characters move from nervous or become excited. And then we look at the opposite of that. And again, this is the whole, we see where they end up, we consider what's the opposite of that, and that becomes our beginning. So friends are terrified of blank. Could be of a zombie. It could be like a Scooby-Doo sort of situation where they end up being terrified of something and then they find out that it's okay, it's just a mask. So seeing our goal is to help middle schoolers get better at acting gave us these ideas of things that we want to focus on to help them grow. And also it tells us some things that we're probably not going to have as topics and gives us more of a vision. And again, you can look at what are they interested in? What are these particular middle schoolers interested in? If they're really into gaming, okay, you could consider making a story about video games. If they are really into TV shows, you could consider making it about TV shows. If they are really into robotics, or if they are really into world history, so on and so forth, you can target it to those middle schoolers. And that's where, so for middle schoolers, does give you a bit of a target. The more detailed that you can get on this, the more that you can target this story to your target market. So that's how you can take a story statement and you can develop out a story from it.